Welcome to the Further Light Podcast, presented by Wisconsin Freemasonry, helping you accomplish your Masonic goals through education and more light. And now, I present to you, Brother Chris Ludke.
Listeners, scholars, brothers, this is Brother Chris Ludke, and today I want to explore why we use symbols. Why are symbols so important in Freemasonry? Now, in previous episodes, we've spent a lot of time talking about the history of the craft, the tools, the symbols. The transition from operative Freemasons to speculative philosophers, even the lighthearted world of side degrees. But today I want to slow things down. I want to look at the very thing that hits you the moment you walk into a lodge room for the first time. The symbols, the visuals. If you ask a non-Mason what Masonry is about, they'll probably mention the square and compass. Maybe they'll mention a trowel. Now, we take these items and we call them the working tools. They're active, they're tactile. But there is a second category of symbolism in the lodge that is perhaps even more profound, yet overlooked by the casual observer. I'm talking about the picture lectures and the symbols therein. If you look at the walls of an old lodge, or you see a master's carpet spread out on the floor, or today probably mounted on the wall of a lodge somewhere, you see a dense, almost overwhelming tableau of imagery. You see an anchor, an arc, an hourglass, a scythe, a weeping virgin, a glimmering star. These aren't tools to be used to build something, they're pictures you use to see something. Today we're exploring why Masons communicate through this silent visual language. Why we use symbols instead of just giving a straight lecture. How these picture lectures serve as a roadmap of the internal life of a Mason. To understand why we use pictures, we have to go back to the 1700s. In the earliest days of English Masonry, there was no permanent lodge building. Masons met in the upper level of a tavern because the secrets of a craft were considered sacred. They couldn't leave permanent marks behind. So what did they do? And I've covered this in more detail when I talk about the history of the trestle board. But at the end of the day, what happens here is the tiler, the guard of the door, would take a piece of chalk or charcoal and literally draw the symbols of the degree on the floor of the tavern. He would draw the pillars, the steps, the symbols of that night's work. And at the end of the meeting, the new initiate was handed a mop and bucket, or sometimes the tiler held a mop and bucket, and were told to erase the evidence. Eventually, someone realized that scrubbing tavern floors every Tuesday night was a bit tedious. They started painting these symbols on removable cloths that could be rolled up and stored. These became known as master's carpets or tracing boards. These boards eventually evolved the elaborate picture lectures or charts that we see today. These aren't just decoration. They're a visual syllabus of Freemasonry. So why do we use visuals? I want to put on my art historian cap for a minute. Art and visual culture is a language. The reason some of you may have taken art history in the past is to be able to read that language. And let me give you a simple idea. Imagine the symbol for a telephone. For example, you're walking through an international airport. You don't speak the language. What do you see? You see a handset, like an old-fashioned payphone that if you're over the age of 40, you probably remember. And the thing is, that pictograph tells you telephone, but it also tells someone who's 20 telephone, even though they may not have ever seen that kind of handset. They may have no experience with it. That's quick visual language. And Masonry uses it for the same reason we use it in the airport: universality. The most common question I get is, why be so cryptic? If you want to teach someone to be honest, why not just tell them be honest instead of showing them a tool? The answer lies in the psychology of the human mind. Words are precise, but they are also limiting. When I say the word integrity, your brain looks for a definition. And definitions are static. They live in dictionaries. But a symbol can be an invitation. A symbol doesn't have a definition. It has resonance. When we look at a picture of an anchor or an arc, we aren't reading a sentence about hope. We are experiencing a visual metaphor that connects our present struggles to the ideas of a safe harbor. Symbols allow a man to fill in the blanks with his own life experience. A 21-year-old man looks at the symbol of an hourglass and thinks about his future. An 80-year-old man looks at the same hourglass and thinks about his legacy. The symbol grows with the man. Words stay the same. Symbols evolve. Let's look at some of the non-tool symbols that make up these lectures. These are the ones that move beyond the building metaphor and into the realm of the soul. One of the most abstract and powerful images in the picture lecture is a simple point inside of a circle, typically bordered by two parallel lines. To a mathematician, it's geometry. To a Mason, the point represents the individual, and the circle represents the boundary of his life and actions, his circumference of influence. We're told that this teaches self-restraint. And the thing is, that simple symbol that you can look at and understand in under 5 seconds tells us as much as the paragraph that you would read out of ritual. It tells us as much as an entire podcast that I do on the topic, or a 50-page paper someone writes on it. And that's the beauty of it. Oftentimes, a symbol is a far more efficient thing to get across an idea. It can get across an idea in seconds that would otherwise take paragraphs or minutes or hours to explain. Let's look at another one. One of the most famous and probably the most misunderstood symbols is the eye, usually surrounded by a glory or rays of light. While conspiracy theorists love to claim this is some kind of governmental surveillance, which would be tricky in 1700 when we start, in the Lodge it represents consciousness and divine watchfulness, among other things. It's a reminder that even when we are alone, our actions matter. It's about the internal observer, the conscience. By placing this at the top, the picture lecture reminds us that all our smaller actions are viewed through the lens of our highest ideals. Let's look at one more. The arc reminds us of the voyage of life, sometimes stormy, sometimes calm, while the anchor represents that which holds us steady. These are not just maritime images, they're symbols of stability. When your world is in chaos, what is your anchor? Is it your faith, your family, your principles? The picture asks the question, but it lets you provide the answer. There is a historical technique that is known as the art of memory. Ancient orators would visualize a large building, a palace, and place parts of their speech in different rooms. As they walked through the palace in their mind, they would remember their points. I should point out that in the ancient world, generally speaking, orators spoke off the cuff or with completely rehearsed speeches. They memorized everything. There were no notes. The Masonic picture lecture is essentially a memory palace on canvas. When a master delivers the lecture, he's walking the candidate through the image. Look here at the hourglass. Look here at the column. By connecting the moral lesson to a physical image, Masonry ensures that the lesson stays lodged in the mind. And by the way, this is something that Masonry was ahead of the times on. How many lectures did you get if you're over the age of 45, 50, 55 in college where they just read to you out of notes and you had no idea what was going on, but now you see your kids getting similar lectures and they're getting PowerPoints, images, and suddenly things click a lot more. Dry history becomes much more interesting when you can show the map of the battle. Now, pedagogy, the art of teaching, has been teaching this for years, that we need to hear things and see things. We need to hear things, and if we can do all three, it's fantastic. Masonry was doing this 300 years ago. It's actually quite remarkable. There's another reason to use pictures, and that is universality. Masonry was born in an era when literacy was not a given, but even a man who couldn't read a single word of a book could read a picture of a ladder reaching towards the stars. In fact, that's why we have much of the symbolism we do, because it was universal. It would have been understood in a predominantly Christian Europe. The symbols that we use are often borrowed from the symbols of religion and other things that would have surrounded these people at the time. Furthermore, Masonry is a global fraternity. A Mason from Japan, a Mason from Italy, a Mason from Brazil may not share a single spoken word, but they all share the same visual vocabulary. They all recognize these symbols. For example, a symbol of a pure heart. They all recognize the beehive as the symbol of industry. These pictures allow the craft to speak across borders, across languages, across centuries. As we wrap up today's episode of Further Light Podcast, I want to leave you with a thought about the difference between looking and seeing. The picture lectures of Masonry are not meant to be solved like a crossword puzzle. You don't just figure out what the sun and moon mean and then check it off your list. These symbols are meant to be meditated upon. A symbol is nothing more than a mirror. When you look at any one of them, for example, the weeping virgin leaning on a broken column, you aren't just looking at a scene of mourning, you're looking at a representation of the unfinished nature of our lives, the unbuilt temples we all carry within us. Why does Masonry use symbols? Because symbols are the only language large enough to hold the complexity of the human condition. It's why art is held in such esteem. It's why we have museums to art but not poetry. It's why visual propaganda is one of the most powerful things that humans have ever come up with, and it has resulted in memes. There is actually a very specific connection, and it's exactly the same. We go to those things because, well, it speaks to everyone. So they allow us to talk about life, death, hope, integrity without the clutter of definitions or the weight of dogma. The next time you see a Masonic chart, don't just look at the tools. Look at the pictures. Look at the stars, the anchors, the hourglasses. They are the silent sentinels of the craft, waiting to tell you a story that words simply cannot do. At the end of the day, look at those symbols, look at those ideas, interpret them as an outsider, and I'm betting you will get many of the same ideas and lessons as we do inside. And remember, those symbols, those images, those pictures, whether they're shown to you on slides or PowerPoint or drawn on a board, at the end of the day, they are our universal language. They were chosen for a reason. And sometimes it's important to understand those reasons so that we don't overlook their lessons in the future. Thank you for joining me, Brother Chris Leakey, and the entire Further Light team in furthering your quest for light in Masonry.
Are you interested in learning more about Freemasonry in Wisconsin? Visit wisconsinmasons.org to learn more about Masonry and access further educational content and more light. Once again, that address is wimasons.org. Any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email us at education@wisconsinmasons.org. And thank you for listening.